feeling good, can I tell?
Hotel family, my name is Brother Eric. We'd like to welcome everyone to the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club. We meet here every other Wednesday in honor of William Mackey Jr., Amos Wilson, Louis Ray Rivera, Minister Khaled, Alton Maddox, Brother Gil Noble, Brother Assad, Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, Ivan Van Sertima, Professor George Simmons, and the long list of historians who gave up fame and fortune. They tried their best to bring information to the people. They took a hard road. Leola Maddox. And one thing about Leola Maddox, she had an old car, and she worked in Teaneck, and she used to drive that car all the way from Jersey to Brooklyn, the United African Movement, because she believed in lectures and bringing people together. Would eat her dinner there, to have speakers and lectures. So we try our best in her honor because they didn't have to do that. They could have went the other way and say later for it. So we always want to remember these people. Runoko Rashidi. So we're going to bring the camera over to the Amos collection. These books is to help Brother Sababu in African World Info Systems to continue the work of Amos. We have Blueprint for Black Power, Black Owned Black Violence, the psychodynamic of black self-annihilation in service of white domination. And everywhere you turn, you hear people talking about black on black violence, guns, and this and that. They even had a conference down at Barrow Hall with the phonies talking about gun violence. And nobody ever mentions the great work of Amos Wilson. The psychodynamics of black self-annihilation in service of white domination. Meaning the actions we do are white dominated, and they talking about the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat toward a reclamation of the African mind. Sababu's Amos's last book, Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children, Falsification of African Consciousness, the developmental psychology of the black child, issues of manhood in black and white, African-centered consciousness versus the New World Order, the bastardization of African cosmology by S.K. Damiana and our good friend Louis Ray Rivera. His classic, Jazz in Jail. And Louis Ray would come down to Mackey's when Mackey left us. And he would do a lecture and talk for hours. And then we would walk him home. And he lived a couple of blocks away. And he'd still talk for another hour and a half. So I never want to forget Brother Louis Ray. And he come out of Marcy Project. I got some more books that I want y'all to hear and read if you want to. Get them and read them. In honor of Big Harold, who left us too soon. The transfer agreement, the untold story of the secret pact between the Third Reich and Jewish Palestine. I mentioned these books, you can get them. In honor of Dr. Ben, black man of the Nile and his family. Dr. Ben lays out all the stuff going on in ancient Kemet. Wasn't too many computers. So we want to honor Dr. Ben with this one. Our good friend, in my personal opinion, and I'll say it again, the only person that cared about the people of Georgia, Cynthia McKinney, when China sneezes from the coronavirus lockdown to the global political economic crisis. Our sister Cynthia McKinney is a bad motor scooter, so we got this book in her arm. Dr. Randy Short, Slavery Mastery, the impact of religious slavery revealed. We have that in honor of Randy Short. You see a lot about medical marijuana flourishing all over the place. People smoking it. It's legal. Everybody's pushing it. Big city mayors, governors. On page 48, Dope Incorporated, the British Opium War against the world, and you got a picture of George Soros, who has his hand in controlling of a lot of Democrats. George Soros. You even got pictures of his son running around here with Democrats. So we're going to talk about some reparations. No? In honor of Louis Ray and Brother Truss, Max A. Dillon, Jews Gone in History. Questionably the best popular history of the Jewish written in English language. This is in honor of Louis Ray and Brother Truss Grant. I picked up this book by listening to a Professor Mackey's tape, City College and the Jewish Poor. And this is when it was free. Now they charge you all the money to go there. But this is an excellent book. You hear a lot about reparations. Raji, zoom in on this, please. And I'll say it every week, because this is the new con game to get black people to vote Democrat. They're going to come up with another study. Hangings, lynchings. The name of the book is Without Sanctuary, Lynching Photography in America. Every page, they got the lynchings. And I just found out that the head of the Reparations Committee for the Congressional Black Caucus is a Jewish fellow named Steve Cohen.
Who is that book by?
The name of the book is Without Sanctuary. You can go over there and pick it up, check it out. So, it's going to be a long road to get these reparations, and it's the new bandwagon. They can't even take care of their own. I don't know what make you think they're going to give us something. They ain't giving you a goddamn thing. Capitalism on a ventilator. The impact of COVID-19, China and the U.S. A lot of things happen with the ventilators. Got the book right here. In honor of our good brother out of Georgia, Dr. Scott Whitaker and Jose Fleming, Medicine. Pick up this book, and it's The Causes and Solution to Disease and Malnutrition and the Medical Sins That Are Killing the World. Dr. Scott does an excellent job with this book. It basically tells you the history of the plant-based phenomenon that everybody's jumping on. Oh boy. Ayo Kamati, classic. He redid it, Jews Are the Problem. And he has the pictures and the information in color on who controls the media and how they dog us out. Jews are the problem. World War II food shortages, racial conflict, and globalization. You can get it on Money Tree Publishing. Money Tree Publishing. In honor of Io Kamati. Brother Edward Dow used to be an analyst for BlackRock. Causes unknown. The epidemic of sudden death in 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. Every time you open up the newspaper, we see somebody falling. And they never really, and they're starting to hide it. They don't want to tell you, but he has the pictures of the people that all of a sudden, young Canadian doctors who died suddenly in March 21. Scott, doctor, died after having a heart attack while swimming. So Edward Down did an excellent job on this. Presidential candidate, Robert Kennedy Jr. And it's a strong possibility he don't get my vote. The real Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the global war on democracy. As director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci dispensed $6.1 billion in annual taxpayer providing funding for scientific research. Get this book, bestseller, and it's on Amazon. Dr. Joseph McCullough and Ronald Cummins, The Truth About COVID-19 and the Great Reset. Fear is ultimately what strips us of our human rights and drives a society into total totalitarianism. The only way to circumvent such a fate is to bravely resist. Words of Dr. McCullough. Robert Kennedy's next bestseller, The Wuhan Cover-Up and the Terrifying Bioweapons Arms Race. Gain of function from the New York Times for Anthony Fauci. Gain of function experiments are often conducted to deliberately develop highly virulent, easily transmissible pathogens for the state purpose of developing preemptive vaccines for animal viruses before they jump to humans. More insidious is the dual-use nature of this research, specifically directed toward bioweapon development. This is just the cover page of it. Another Kennedy bestseller, Vax versus Unvaxxed, Let the Science Speak. The study of the CDC refuses to do. This book is based on over 100 studies in the peer-reviewed literature that considered vaccinating versus unvaccinated populations. Each study is analyzed in health difference among infants, children, adults who have been vaccinated and those who have not are presented in the context. Readers will inform information on the infant child vaccination schedule, thimerosal and vaccines, live virus vaccines, the human papillomavirus virus, HPV, vaccinations and Gulf War illness, influenza, flu vaccines, hepatitis B, the COVID-19, and vaccines during pregnancy. Given the massive push to vaccinate the entire global population, this book is timely and necessary for individuals to make informed choices for themselves. Presidential candidate Robert Kennedy Jr. I'm going to read a few announcements for the listening audience if they want to do any other programs of information to the community. Tomorrow, Thorough Black Talk with Tad, Keisha, Ashe, Sister Marcia, and Brother Black. That comes on YouTube Thursday at 8 o'clock on Facebook Live. That's Thorough Black Talk, one of the hottest shows on the East Coast. Sister Filet and the Million Women's March. Blog Talk Radio out of Philly. Sister Empress Chi is doing an excellent job. Every Saturday at 10:30, the telephone number is 1-319-527-6189, and you can join in on the conversation. We want to salute Sister Empress Chi and our Philadelphia connection. Brother Io Kamati, once again. Sankofa Revolutionary Radio, 10 a.m. on Mondays. WSYP 95.1 out of Birmingham, Alabama, with Brother Anthony Mohammed, and he gets into his books and everything that he's getting into. He's out of Washington, D.C., and you could call into that radio program at 10 to 11. Dr. Io is doing an excellent job there with Tate. Our Baltimore connection with Brother Darren Muhammad, State of the City. 1590 TuneIn Radio, and on Instagram, State of the City, Baltimore, Darren Muhammad. Comes on Saturday at 12 o'clock, comes on sometime Wednesday, sometime Thursday. But Darren Muhammad is laying it down. We want to give him a great big hand. Dr. Aline, Your Immunity Program, Your Immunity Project, 7 o'clock. If you go into Your Immunity Project with Dr. Aline, you can get the information, and he was hot last night. I mean, I got to give Dr. Aline, his program is nice. You take what you need, the rest you leave it where it's at. Every Friday, African Echo Study Group out of Newark. The moderator of that group is Brother Trust Graham with Danny, Brother True, and everybody out of Newark. They're doing the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat toward a reclamation of the African mind. And also, they're going to give you a double header. That's Friday at 8 o'clock, African Echoes, and then they give you a double header Saturday. The study group is called Know Thyself Study Group with Brother True and the brothers out of Asbury Park. Trust is also the mediator of that group. And they're doing the destruction of black civilization and other publications that Brother Trust talks about, and he's a bad man. I want to thank James McIntosh, his program today with Dr. Craig, the Simotap community with Dr. McIntosh, Sister Richardine Theodore and Betty Dobson, excellent job. The radio program is called Minefield, and it comes on WBAI 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and they had a brother on today that was fierce talking about substance abuse, and I think his name was Dr. Craig, but he was talking about substance abuse, nicotine, the different drugs that the medical society do with people getting high, and how the narcotics bonded with people, how you got strung out, and how they used to stop, But in my personal opinion, he didn't mention the Coupe de Ville of it, the 12-step programs that's been working and helping people for years. And that's something they haven't been able to figure out. Okay, the Community Cop radio program comes on every Tuesday at 5 o'clock. You can go into the old Community Cop lectures with Brother Mike and Noel Leader. That's on Tuesday at Manhattan Neighborhood Network. You can go into all the old programs and do your research and go back and study. So those are just events that's going on in the global black community. Ladies and gentlemen, our keynote speaker tonight, you can view all the community, all the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club lectures with Dr. Arthur Lewis, Brother Mike, and all our speakers, Sister Keisha. You can go on YouTube and go over our lectures, and whatever you don't believe, you can study it yourself and research it. So, without further ado, Brother Mike is going to do a lecture on Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement. Ladies and gentlemen, Give yourself a great big hand. Give yourself a great big hand on the Zoom audience and the people that came out to support us. We're going to have Brother Mike Gray.
It's an honor to be here today. Say I am, because we are. Say I am, because we are. And that's always important. That's very important to say and to embrace. Hopefully, many of us will embrace that. We're here because somebody helped us. Whatever station in life you might be in right now, just always remember it could be worse. Whatever station you are in life right now, it could be much worse. So we have to be thankful for those who sojourned before us. What and Harriet Tubman would give to be in our position. To be beaten and whipped and enslaved, and so many of our women that were raped, even little boys were raped, as they called them back then, bed warmers. You know, grown men that had bed warmers, they were raping little boys in the north, in the south, east and west. And so I thank all those who came out of these inclement conditions, because it's important that we have these reminders to let all of us know just quite where we're at right now. And there's a few things that I want to talk to tonight. Is so many always say, I'm just reminding you of things that many of you already know, and there might be a thing or two here that might be revelatory, but for the most part, these are things that you know, and hopefully I can give it some context and you can understand it better. Now, Ray said that I'm going to talk about Dr. King and civil rights, and that's true. Certainly, I'm going to do that, but there's a few other house cleaning measures that I probably should mention first before I go any further. First, want to acknowledge there's a couple of birthdays that should be mentioned, and I would be remiss because I don't think it was mentioned last week. You know, our sister Leola Maddox had a birthday. And you know, we got to remember her Earth Day, whether she's with us, among us or not, because she was just so important to all that we do. So I want to acknowledge Sister Leola Maddox for all the things that she's done. And it's, we're gonna always remember Sister Leola Maddox in all that we do, wherever we go and whatever we can get accomplished. We know that she's sitting down there, sitting up there, looking down at us, saying, well done, well done. That's good, you know, and you know, we do things to make her proud. Also, there's another birthday of somebody that I want to mention from the outset, and that's Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad. Another person who comes out of the warrior class, and very important to mention him. When he was among us, he didn't have a lot of venues that he could go to. You know, it's there were very few given that time, and that's well over 20 some odd years ago that Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad was with us. But we should always remember him in all that we do, because his sincerity stands out. If you are around people, especially around a lot of so-called leaders, you can see good points and bad points. You can see those that are fake and those that are real. And I'm going to tell you for the record, you could not be more real, more sincere than Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad. He was about it in the very things that he said he really meant it. Now, some people say things and they really don't mean it. They just saying it. It's just word noise. Not so with Dr. Khalid. Dr. Khalid was the real deal. He was as authentic could be. And so just want to remember him. And right now, it's not her birthday, but it's somebody that I'm thinking of and want to wish her revolutionary greetings. And that's Sister Pam Africa. She's been on my mind today a lot. And so I want to acknowledge Sister Pam Africa for just being that important to us, that we should always acknowledge her and all that we're doing. And, you know, anytime you can be around her, give her a hug and tell her you appreciate her work.
Ashe.
Because her work is important, Ashe. Her work is that important. So we should always remember Pam Africa in all that we do. And so whether it's Sister Leona Maddox, Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad, Sister Pam, for the record, we are a mighty people.
Ashe.
We're glorious. We have the right to exist, and we're gonna exist. Whether anybody likes it or not, we're gonna exist. We're gonna be here.
Amen.
We haven't gone anywhere. All of us, you should all be happy that your kinfolk made it through the Middle Passage.
Amen.
It wasn't easy. So no matter where you at now, your kinfolk made it through the Middle Passage or you wouldn't be here. We're the evidence of their strength and veracity.
Amen.
You know, men and women.
Ashe.
You're talking about a real stalwart that endeavored to persevere, or we wouldn't be here. And I know that you think your presence here is automatic. Like you was meant to be here, it's automatic, and every day we live and breathe, it's automatic. Not so. You know, we can walk out here tonight, we can walk anywhere tonight, and anything can happen to us. But for God's grace, His grace is sufficient, and this is why so many of us are here. Now, many of us attribute that to training, eating right, the overall health, just being kind to people, being warm-hearted and all the things that we do. And that's all well and fine, but to me, God's grace is sufficient. That's what empowers us. That's what undergirds us in everything that we do. So to those who believe, fine, and if you believe that you operate just as fine without the Creator, that's okay. You know, that's the path you've chosen, but somebody helped you get here, nonetheless. And as I said, we've gone through so much that we could all write books on what we've gone through, and it's very important. Now, I'm going to talk about Dr. King tonight and the civil rights movement. Now, last week, today is the 24th, so 9 days ago, on his birthday, on the 15th, we heard a lot of things about Dr. King. And so I won't mention those things that we heard. Most people heard things around, I have a dream, you know, and that whole thing, and his philosophical approach to preaching. And that's fine. But it was so much more to Dr. King, and they allowed the I have a dream thing and things like that to be his narrative. And that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface. Because if I said to you, well, he also said near the end of his existence, he said maybe we've integrated into a burning house. So he was already rethinking so many things that he had spent his life fine-tuning. So let's keep that in mind. Now, before I go further with Dr. King, you know, there are so many other people that preceded him that laid the foundation for Dr. King. But at this time, in 2024, you have presidential candidates talking about the Civil War, talking about slavery, and what caused the Civil War. That's an issue that doesn't seem to disappear with Nikki Haley, and that's her Americanized name. She has an Indian name, and I haven't even taken the time to explore her name, but she uses an Americanized name, Nikki, as opposed to Namaranda, whatever her name is, something like that. And so in any event, I'm saying that to say that she said that the Civil War, when she mentioned the causes of the Civil War, she didn't mention slavery. And so many people took an issue with that. And so many people do not know what caused the Civil War. So she was able to get away with it that night, but she's been approached since then, and commentators, even white ones, are asking her, what does she mean by saying that slavery was not an issue in the Civil War? I might shock a few people tonight to say, for all the wrong reasons, she was right. She was right. That wasn't the cause of the Civil War. Slavery was not the issue with the Civil War. Now, some people think it is, and it's okay. If you think that slavery was the reason for the Civil War, that's fine, if that's what you believe. It's not accurate, but if you believe that, it's okay. The reason I'm saying that that's not an issue is because that's a more recent explanation on what happened. So my question to you is, what really happened? Did white men fight other white men over us? No. Could over 650, 700,000 white men kill each other over us? No. Now, some might say they never have and they never will. Fight to the death over us. Now, some of us believe that Lincoln freed us. Some of us, even leaders among us, say he's the great emancipator. Some call him the great liberator, as if he's Moses of the Bible, or some fantasy that just dropped from heaven and demanded that the South free its slaves. Well, I'm going to destroy that myth real quickly, and then we'll get on to Dr. King. The reason why I can safely say, and it doesn't matter if I had Harvard and Yale history professors sitting in this room, I would tell them the same thing. The reason is, it wasn't mentioned. Here's what. Lincoln himself said that he was personally, now get this right now, he was personally opposed to slavery. That's personal. Lincoln, on a personal level, was opposed to slavery. That had nothing to do with his politics. I'm going to say it again so you can get it. It had nothing to do with his politics. He would not engage close to 700,000 men in a battle of attrition over black folks. Some of his best friends had slaves. Now, when you saw various states, 13 in particular, 11 officially, and the other 2 unofficially, engaged in a war between the states. The thing you have to remember is that Lincoln was not going to allow 13 states to succeed under his administration. He wasn't going to allow it. In other words, you could say he was gangster. You could say he was gangster. He told everybody in the room, everybody staying in this room, if you try to step out of the door of this room, I'm coming after you. Now you decide what you want to do. This is basically what he said. Now, he told the South, here's further proof to all y'all that love Lincoln so much. He told the South, you can keep your slaves. Said this directly. You can keep your slaves, but put down your guns. Put the guns down and come back into the room. That was what Lincoln said. Lincoln said, I will free every black man and woman in America to keep the Union together. I will enslave every black man and woman in America to keep the Union together. What was his emphasis then? Can anybody tell me? Yes, to keep the Union together. He wanted to keep the Union together. By hook or crook, he wanted to keep the Union together. Now, the reason why that's important is because, let me ask you another question. And you don't have to answer, you could make a motion. If Lincoln wanted to free the slaves, why didn't he free the slaves in the North? If his emphasis was on slavery, why did the slaves right here in New York, why were they still in slavery? Why were the slaves in New Jersey?
Rhode
Island, Vermont.
Massachusetts.
Of course, Massachusetts.
Big colony.
Why were they enslaved? If the emphasis, Delaware. Come on now, Pennsylvania. Why were they, Ohio? Why were they enslaved if Lincoln was against slavery? And the war was with the South to end slavery. Why were the enslaved Africans all through the North enslaved? That's what I want you to ask the next professor that tells you that Lincoln freed the slaves. Then just say, okay, if the South, the Confederate States, succeeded from the Union. They succeeded from the Union. So at that time, until he can bring them back with force and power, he could not free the South. Then what's the excuse for not freeing enslaved Africans in the North? Where he had authority. He had authority in Washington to free slaves. Why didn't he free them? He had authority in New York and everywhere else to free slaves. Why didn't he free them?
They wasn't a part of the Union.
Because it's priority.
They were part of the Union. That wasn't his priority. New York was a part of the Union. New Jersey, Philadelphia, all of that was a part of the Union. Then why were we enslaved? His personal position had nothing to do with his politics. I dare say elected officials today, their personal opinion very rarely has anything to do with their politics. If you're born in certain states and you want to rise to power, you join the party that's in power. Is that right? If you wanted to be an elected official, primarily, let's say mayor in New York City, more than likely, what party are you going to belong to?
Democrat.
Democrat. Regardless. It doesn't matter what your personal politics are. You want power in New York, you're going to join the Democrats. Because that's the party with the most power. It used to be 6-1, 5-1. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but it's not far away from 5-1. So you say, well, how did Bloomberg become mayor? How did Rudolph Giuliani become mayor? How was Mayor Lindsay mayor in a Democratic time? Well, those are things that happen in politics. Sometimes it's the person who preceded them messed up so bad or crossed so many people that next election, the Democrats suffered. That happens. That happens normally in presidential elections. If that person does something and it goes amiss, what happens in the next election? You lose. Now, Nixon won pretty handily. But what happened when Nixon was accused of these various crimes? Carter was able to get in. A Democrat, relatively unknown, obscure for the most part, a governor in Georgia. He was able to become, and then after that one term, the Republicans bounced back with a vengeance with Ronald Reagan. And then after 8 years of Ronald Reagan, you still had George Bush, Bush 41. So you had a 12-year reign, and that was broken up by Bill Clinton. But my point is that your personal views are not always the determining factor in how you're going to govern. That's my overwhelming point. Your personal opinion of things are not going to in any way affect how you're going to govern. Now, it is ideal when your politics are in line with your personal view. So some might accuse certain elected officials of personally being, let's say, hateful toward blacks, and their politics are hateful towards black. Well, that can happen. As a matter of fact, it happens a lot because the majority of white people do not want the black family to survive. Consequently, their politics reflect that. So I'm saying all that just to say that Lincoln as presidents go, he wasn't particularly a bad guy, even though he did want the free blacks, once blacks were free, he wanted you to move. He thought of various Caribbean countries as well as African countries where the move can be made. Because he understood that as a white man, he did not want a lot of black people to walk around America free. Now, the same thing happened with the so-called founding fathers. Did George Washington and Ben Franklin and others, Monroe and all these, Jefferson, did they want us free?
Nope.
Didn't they have slaves? Madison and all these guys? Well, their politics were clear. So when they said all men were created equal and endowed with certain inalienable rights, who were they talking about?
Themselves. White men.
They were talking about white men. They weren't talking about black men.
Everybody.
They certainly didn't include everybody. They were talking about themselves. So that's called original intent. When you take the founding fathers, even at this late date, and use them as a model on how you're going to comport yourself. That's original intent. When you hear people argue as strict constructionalists, that's what they're talking about. They say, no, that's not what George Washington wanted. Now, he's one of the biggest slave owners in the country. And even after, of course, when he married up with his wife, who also came from a rich and prominent family, he was one of the richest men in America, and he had a lot of slaves, well over 600 or more slaves under him. So obviously, he had a position on slavery, which was clear. You know, and I won't even go into the one female that escaped from his plantation. And he put a lot of time and effort into trying to find her. He never found her. She was able to escape and get all the way to Canada. The sister was aided, helped by free blacks. Yeah. They were, even before that was around, but they had that type of system in place where they were able to get on a boat and ship her up north from his plantation in Virginia. And it's amazing. And you have to honor those who were free. You have to honor those who were free. And yet they took the risk of freeing our people. That's major. Just imagine being a free man or a free woman, and there's an enslaved African that's trying to escape, and you aided and abetted them in their quest to be free. That's amazing when you think about it, because you're talking about a situation where you can lose your freedom, you can lose your life if you were a part of any type of slave escape. You know, if you were participating in anything like that, or whether you gave aid in the form of housing, food, money, and those things, you can be in a world of trouble if you were caught. So I'm just saying that even before the Underground Railroad, these things were happening, and George Washington himself put out a wanted poster for that sister who was able to escape from his plantation. So again, I just want to make the point that Lincoln had the power, and Lincoln did not use the power because that was not his intent to free slaves. Now, some might argue, well, in January 1st of 1863, he did the Emancipation Proclamation. Did that free anybody? No, didn't free anybody. He did what accurately called a proclamation. What's a proclamation?
Rhetoric.
Rhetoric. It's just political rhetoric.
Document.
You know, dogma, whatever you want to call it. Because
Can you all hear? I can't hear.
It really did not free people.
so no, it didn't free anyone. But
No, I'm texting Ray right now to tell him to check the screen. It's froze up.
okay, he's working on it right now. So he did the Emancipation Proclamation after a Civil War battle where, you know, the North did well and he felt this was safe enough to now make that proclamation, which he had in his back pocket for a few months. He was looking for the right time. He was advised by his Secretary of War, now to wait until after a good victory because you didn't want to look weak in your presentation. So this is what he did. He made a proclamation, which was a last-ditch effort to try to get the South to drop their arms. So when he told them to drop their arms and come in, he did it this time with a warning. And his warning was, if you do not drop your weapons and come back into the Union, you will lose it. Once you lose this war, you will also lose your slaves and all your property. That's what he told the South. Now, the South had that option, but now you're 2 years into a war. Is rhetoric going to change you after 2 years of bloodshed? So why do our elected officials, why do professors say to this day that Lincoln freed the slaves? Who did he free? He didn't free anybody in the North, which was under his administration. He certainly could not free anybody in the South because they had seceded from the Union. So I'm wondering, who did he free? Now, what he did do, what Lincoln did do, and I'll get to Dr. King in a second. What he did do, and I hope I hope it's unfroze on Zoom now so they can get this part. What he did do is that he went before the Congress. And in going before the Congress, he asked for permission for black soldiers to fight for the North, which was different than carrying supplies, cooking food, doing menial jobs to help the soldiers. But they could not fight. But that goes all the way back to the 1700s, I think 1785, where that was under George Washington's leadership, where once they had gotten far enough in the administration where now they were no longer under British rule, they said blacks will not be allowed to be a part of the armed forces or any type of armed militia, anything like that. So Lincoln had to go before the Congress and present that legislation, which was passed. So now blacks could fight as of 1863. Guess when the North started kicking butt?
When blacks started having a fight.
In 1863. From then on, it was on. And the battle changed. Where that battle of attrition, the South was hanging in there. They could no longer overwhelm the North once blacks started doing what they did. So, I wanted to just point out that the reason for the Civil War was not slavery. It was states' rights. It was the right for a state to be sovereign. They also had economic causes. The South was ticked off that the prices for cotton was being determined where? Anybody know?
In New York and Wall Street.
In the north.
Wall Street.
Say it again, brother.
Wall Street.
Wall Street
In New York.
in New York, but Wall Street specifically. Isn't that something that you busting your butt with the cotton and you growing it, and somebody in New York tells you what you're gonna get for a bale of cotton?
Don't even see it.
They got tired of that. They said, how can you dictate to us? So imagine you being in Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, and cotton is king. Now, sugar and all that was important, tobacco, all important, but cotton was king. There was such a demand for cotton in Europe that the price of cotton was being determined right here in New York, Wall Street. They were fed up with that. They said, we want to cut deals with England and places like that, France with the cotton. They were tired of wearing wool and animal skins and all that stuff. They wanted to dress in cotton. And the North was dictating the prices. So this middleman was making money without putting in that effort. But see, they don't tell you that. They tell you that it was slavery. It wasn't slavery. It had an economic basis, and also it infringed on their style of governing. You can't tell another man how to run his house. South Carolina had a long history of rebellion. That's why it was the first state to succeed. Followed by Mississippi and Georgia, Alabama, and all of them. South Carolina was the first. Defiant. The representative, Preston Brooks, from South Carolina, beat the hell out of Senator, what's his name? Schumer, not Schumer. His name is on the tip of my tongue. It sounds like Schumer, but it's not Schumer. The Massachusetts U.S. Senator. Beat the hell out of him, caned him almost to death. Preston Brooks beat him on the congressional floor.
Sumner?
Yeah, Charles Sumner. Charles Sumner. I'm saying Sheldon. Sumner. Beat the hell out of him. Beat him so bad within an inch of his life. Because he said he actually was talking, he was talking to the U.S. Senator from South Carolina. But he was an older guy and didn't really want to fight. He didn't really want to get down with Sumner.
Took a cane.
But his nephew,
Bashed him with a cane.
yeah, his nephew did. Because he talked about the South being wedded to slavery. And insinuated that one of the reasons why the South loved slavery so much was not only the money, the fact that they had their choice of black women, that they was raping them. And the senator took offense to that But instead of him fighting, his nephew, Preston Brooks, was the one that ran up there on the floor and took a cane and beat the hell out of Charles Sumner, almost killed him for that. So I'm just saying there were a lot of reasons, and that was in the, about 4 or 5 years before, maybe in 1856, 1857. So we're talking about a few years before the Civil War started, which started in 61. So I'm just saying that to say that Lincoln did not start a civil war for slavery. He made it clear, he told the South in no uncertain terms, you can keep your slaves, but you got to drop your weapons. And you have to come back into the room, into the Union. Simply put, sharp talk for sharp understanding. Straight to the point, raw. Told them, you can keep your slaves, but damn it, you better come back into this room. And you're a part of the Union, whether you like it or not. You're not succeeding. That was his position. So it was harsh, but he just gave it to him straight, that he wasn't going to allow it. And he didn't. So that was my whole point. So when you hear Nikki Haley and you hear other presidential candidates discuss what the reasons for the Civil War is, you know now. You know that slavery came up much later, the whole question of slavery. And still it took over 200,000, 230,000 black men to fight and beat the hell out of white folks, armed to the teeth, to get that right to be free. That's where it came from. So keep that in mind, that you can't have black men fight a war from 63 on, and they were participating in small capacities, and very few fought with guns before that, but it became uniform after that to fight. And this is why you could not take all their weapons back and say, you have to go back, get in these chains. We got some new chains for you. Couldn't do it. So they had to change the politics after that. So, and it had very little to do with Lincoln himself. Even though he was still the president, this all happened before he was assassinated. So, then the 13th Amendment came into existence. In 1865, you had the 14th Amendment in 1868, which is giving you citizenship. And then, of course, in 1870, you had the 15th Amendment, which gave you the right to vote. Black men, not women. Black men had the right to vote in 1870. It was 50 years away before white and black women could vote. That was in 1920. So you talk about even after all these skirmishes and all of this stuff, women could not vote. It took 50 years from 1870 for women to get the right to vote. So just wanted to mention that because so many people are wondering what role did slavery play in the Civil War. You can tell them very little to nothing, and it had nothing to do. The war, I'm not saying that there didn't come a time where there was factors. I'm saying it did not provoke a war. Just show me where in the world, anywhere, where white men will kill other black men, where white men will kill other white men. For us. That's just fantasy. It's myth. It's myth. It doesn't exist. So that wasn't the reason for the war. That was not the reason. Now, for black men, yes, it was an opportunity. But we're talking about for white men. it was not the reason. Black men saw, we got a chance. We got a chance to be free. That was because they saw an opportunity.
And they ran and joined.
Yeah. People started leaving the plantation, running as soon as they could. Anytime they saw Northern troops anywhere, Union soldiers, they joined up, signed up right away. So that's all that was. So it is not true that slavery caused over 650,000 white men to die. Now you're talking about well over 1/5 of the country died at that time. 1/5, over 1/5. Now America is now how many people? 350 million? 380? 380? So if in today's thing that would be what? Over 80 million?
38.
No, it would be more like 80,
Yeah, about 70 something.
70 something, 80 million. That would be equivalent to in today's time. So that's a significant number to lose over 1/5 of your population. White men would never do that. Lose 1 out of 5 people. For us, it doesn't make sense. So that's the situation. So now let me move to Dr. King. We comfortable with what I just said about the Civil War? Yes, ma'am.
I wonder if you have any information, because you mentioned the right to vote in 1870.
Yes.
I know the blacks registered in mass, and within a short period of time, you may have had as many as 20 million registered voters, and within another decade or two, that was reduced to less than 1 million.
Yeah, well, there were reasons for that.
Yeah, but I wonder if he was gonna mention something.
Well, no, I just wanted to mention the Civil War because so many people think that slavery had something to do with the Civil War and had little to nothing to do. Now, what you're talking about is some of the things I'm going to cover is voting rights. You know, certainly there were barricades in many different forms and fashions that kept us from the ability to vote. That's still going on now, you know, to this very day. So, in any event, the 7 principles of Ma'at is truth, balance, order, harmony, righteousness, morality, and justice. Now, what does that have to do with Dr. King? That has to do with our culture. That has to do with the way we comport ourselves every day. Secretary said, everything you do should be within the bounds of your culture. So we should not be out of pocket. We should not be doing things counter to our culture. And if you're in leadership, that onus is on you to always stay within our culture, because we have the parameters to do things in the right way within our culture. Now, last thing, just to establish you don't do things outside of your culture. Why are we bleaching? And we're going to get started on Dr. King now. Why are we bleaching? So many of our people in America, in North America, in the Caribbean, I dare say in Africa, are bleaching. Do you know that when you bleach, it will destroy or at least compromise your immune system. So you can't readily fight diseases as well once you start bleaching.
But you look good.
We got the comedian here saying but you look good. You look good while you die.
Lighter.
You know.
You look lighter.
You look lighter. Thank you, sister. Thank you for that. You look lighter, not necessarily better. You look lighter. So that's doing something. That's an example of doing something outside your culture. You bleach it. Even when you constantly doing perms and straightening your hair, your hair has a way of returning back to its natural tendencies once you stop perming. So your body is telling you it's unnecessary to straighten one's hair. And all the chemicals that you're using, the parabens that are in it, it will ill affect your health at some point. So be mindful of that. Okay, MLK was the middle child. MLK was the middle child. He had an older sister and a younger brother. He was the type of person that was not confident in his abilities. He always felt a little less than, and which is uncommon for somebody growing up in the middle class. For the most part, when you grow up in the middle class, especially in Georgia, you know, you're doing better than most people around you. You're probably fortunate enough to have wood floors, running water, heat, which is things like that, you know, that at that time, in the 20s and the 30s, everybody didn't have that.
Luxury.
You know, I know people that grew up in the 60s that'll tell you in Mississippi, they didn't have running water. They were still going out to the outhouse and various things like that. So to have plumbing, electrical outlets, and all of that, it was a big plus. But he felt a little less than, and he was sort of rebellious in his own way. Dr. King, first of all, we all know that he wasn't born Martin Luther King. What was his name? Anybody remember?
Nah.
I give you a hint. It's my name.
Michael?
His name was Michael.
I'm
glad you came up with it.
I would have changed it too.
His name was Michael.
Michael Luther King Jr.
What he did was his father. Now, Dr. King was born in 1929, right? In around 1932, his father went to a convention. This convention was all the way in Germany. This was the World Baptist Association, WBA, World Baptist Association Convention. So he went there, and it's a white Baptist group, an international white Baptist group. And one of the ministers recommended to Daddy King that he change his son's name from Michael to Martin Luther, which he did. He changed his name from Michael to Martin Luther. And since he was a junior, well, Daddy King had to change his name too. From Michael to Martin Luther. So he was Martin Luther King from that point on, and at that time, Dr. King was probably about 3 years old. So it wasn't earth-shattering to be told, your name is now Martin instead of Michael. Now, when asked about it later, I mean, I won't go into it, but his father claimed there was an oversight.
Not a suggestion.
in other words, he did not want to be around all these black folks saying that a white guy convinced me to change my son's name. So it's easier to say, oh, it's just oversight. Okay, it could be an oversight on the day your son was born. But how do you explain a day later, a week later, a month later, that translates into 3 years later, that you finally realize, oh man, I wanted to name him Martin Luther all along. 3 years later? Come on now. So, his name was changed to Martin Luther King. And, you know, his father, who affectionately was always called Daddy King. So, in any event, at 12 years old, because like I said, he went through bouts of depression, Martin Luther King. He went through quite a few bouts of depression. And being depressed and being disobedient caused his father to give him quite a few beatings because he was trying to discipline his son. And his son tried to commit suicide at 12 years old. And which is a sign of depression. When you do something like that, and then 2 years later, at 14, he tried it again. And this time it was because his grandmother died. And he blamed it on himself, thinking that that happened because he wasn't listening to his family, and so his grandmother died, and he felt somewhat, in a strange way, responsible for it. And so he tried to jump out of a second floor window to kill himself, but, you know, thank God he survived at 14 years old. So 2 years from the first incident, he tried it again. Now I'm saying things that normally you don't hear on Dr. King's birthday, and I'm telling you this for a reason, and I'm going to get ahead of myself to say all of this was known by the FBI director. What was his name?
Hoover.
His entire name.
J. Edgar.
J. Edgar Hoover. So the dossier was being developed because they knew these things. So in any event, Dr. King, by the time he was 15, he was already in Morehouse. He was a Morehouse man. As you know, you always hear, whether it was Butts or so many other people, I'm a Morehouse man.
Butts?
So,
You can tell a Morehouse man, but you can't tell him anything.
yeah, so in any event, you have Dr. King going to Morehouse, 15 years old, graduates, young man. Now what? He goes to Crozer Theological Seminary. And that's in, since you're taking notes, I can see that. That's in Chester, Pennsylvania. So he goes from Morehouse, now he's up north in Chester, Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, now I didn't talk about this a few years ago when I did a lecture on Dr. King, but our beautiful sister Aura brought it up. So before you bring it up, I'll bring it up and just say that at Crozer Theological Seminary is where he met a white girl. And this white girl became his girlfriend. And not only was she his girlfriend, he was in love with her. I would say madly in love. And his intentions were to marry her. Now, obviously that would not sit well with Daddy King. And his friends told him, Martin, you're earmarked for success. You on the train. You riding. You gonna be the man.
Express train.
It was an express train. He was on an express train for success. He was going to be he was already among that so-called, as Du Bois called it, that talented 10%. So he was on the express train riding fast towards success. His friends advised him, you can't marry her, Martin. That wouldn't sit well with you in Atlanta, Georgia, in a black congregation with a white woman sitting next to you in the pulpit. Can't do it. But be that as it may, that was his intention. And they were an item, and you could see them all over the campus, and he would always take her out to dinner every time he got a chance, or to a movie. He really, really loved it. And when his sister came up, he hit her. Because if she would have told Daddy King would have went to Chester, Pennsylvania, and dealt with Martin. Because he wasn't going to allow that. But in any event, from 1949 to 1951, so you're talking about from the fall of 49 to the spring of 51, you know, that's 2 years of college. Over those 2 years, they were madly in love. And he was going to marry her. But on the advice of all his close friends, everybody, I like that even better, everybody said, Martin, you can't do it. He had to give her up. He was heartbroken. I mean, really, really heartbroken. And went back home. And his next stop was where? Boston University. Now you're in New England. And this is your last stop before you're back in Georgia. And Daddy King was intent on finding him a wife. He went, his daddy King went among the elite in Atlanta looking for. Now I'm mentioning this stuff because this is stuff you don't get on King Day. They talk about all this other stuff, and of course the Nobel Peace Prize and I Have a Dream and all that. So just giving you some background information on Dr. King. And so Dr. King went to, enrolled in from Morehouse to Crozier Theological Seminary. Now he's at Boston University. He's up there with the Blue Bloods now. He's in Boston University. And now he's getting that treasured PhD. And so...
He got a white girl from Boston too?
No, and I'm glad you asked that. Because in Boston, he met this fox. He met a fox named Coretta.
Oh, damn it.
He met a fox named Coretta. Now, when he first got there, when you brokenhearted, you know what you do? You can either go somewhere and just sob and be sad, put your head in the dirt, or you can
make it good.
Just start doing your thing, which is what he did. Sort of playboyish, just running around, doing his thing. And it wasn't a good move, but look, y'all ever heard Richard Pryor say, well, whenever you get brokenhearted, what you gotta do? I won't say the joke, but he just saying basically, do your stuff.
Yeah.
You can't love the one you want, love the one you would.
Well, it was much worse than that, what he was saying. Richard got away of saying things.
I remember that.
Richard, say things like, your best blank is your last blank. That's your best one. So, I'm just trying to, I'm going to keep things classy. We at Professor Mackey's lecture series, so I'm not gonna say it any other way other than, Al Green said, how do you mend a broken heart? That kind of stuff. And there's a way to mend a broken heart. When your heart is broke, there's a way to get around that. Eventually, because one of your friends gonna tell you, man, come on, man, come with me.
Let's go get a white girl.
Let's do something, man. You ain't gonna sit in your room all day and listen to Al Green. We're gonna do something. So in any event, the person who we meant to see, whatever, and somebody said, no, somebody I need you to meet. And that's more serious. And of course, she's a fox. Fine is May wine, as we used to say. Fine as May wine. So he ran into Coretta, and obviously Coretta wasn't that impressed by him because he was short. He was a little short little guy. But she saw that he had the gift of gab. And we all found that out later. He had the gift of gab, and he had command of the language. And he spoke about destiny to her. And she never heard a black man really kick it like that. Now in pimp school, they tell you if I can get her to listen, I got it. Now, you ever heard pimp talk? I'm not saying, I am not saying that Dr. King was a pimp. Don't leave here saying, well, Mike was referring to Dr. King as a pimp. I'm not saying that at all.
Well, that's kind of what I got from your business.
But Pimp say, if I can get your girl to listen to me, I got it. If she can listen to me for 5 minutes, you history.
It's over.
So when he started talking about destiny and laying out certain things to her, she was impressed by it. Now, he was 22, she was 24, so she's a little older and very mature. And so when she saw maturity in him, it impressed her. And they did become an item. And even though Daddy King wanted her to marry somebody in their economic class, because she was poor, she wasn't well-to-do. And the girls that Daddy King was lining up for Dr. King were all, they came from rich families. They had money, they were bushy. But Dr. King was smitten by Coretta. And he told her early on, you the one. Now somebody out there saying, that's pimp talk. You the one. Don't say nothing. Don't say nothing. But it got her. She was impressed when he basically said, nah, you it. I don't need nothing else. You the one. So he got her. And it's good. He got her. And so like I said, they met in 52. By 53, he had a ring on. He bagged it. It was a good move.
He followed Beyonce.
He put a ring on it. And said, got you now. So he got her, and Daddy King really had other women in mind for him. Some really rich women in Atlanta, the Atlanta bourgeoisie, the Atlanta elite, but that's, Dr. King was able to, in this particular instance, defy his father and say, this is who I'm gonna marry. And that's it. So, it was a good thing. And she was classically trained in piano, classically trained, very good. And she envisioned herself as a professional, not just a housewife. But that's the creative kind of things that will bring you together, because she went to his seminar, to his sermons. She went to his sermons at 12th Street Baptist Church in Boston while they were in school, and he would go to her recitals because she was a classically trained pianist. So it worked out. They both supported each other's career at that time. So it worked out, and they became really tight and married, of course. Now, after that, after marriage, they went back to Atlanta and then ended up in Alabama. Where in Alabama? Anybody remember?
No, I don't know none of that shit.
Montgomery. At Dexter Avenue Baptist Church.
Oh, okay.
That was his first pastorship at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. Now, what happened? Is there something that happened at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church?
Probably the
The
son.
kid got raped, right?
Is that what it started?
Yes, but that's not what I'm talking about. Yes. That did happen. But since you mentioned that, let's go with that first. There was a 15-year-old in Dexter Avenue Baptist Church that was raped. Who was the pastor? This is before Dr. King. Who was the pastor?
Oh, man.
Come on, somebody.
Treatment?
Who?
Not treatment. Nah.
Did anybody know who the pastor was?
Forgot his name.
The pastor was Reverend Vernon Johns. Vernon Johns was the pastor. Now, Dexter Avenue Baptist Church is conservative by nature. Very conservative church. Very refined, cultured, bougie. And when the 15-year-old girl got raped, as you mentioned, when she got raped, Vernon Johns, she came to Vernon Johns' office, or as they called it back then, and maybe still do, his study. She came to his study and cried her heart out, laid her heart bare, telling him she was raped, and identifying the attacker. Told him where he lived at and that he raped her. Now, conventional thinking back then was if you was raped, guess what? You had something to do with it. Like, why were you raped? That was the thinking. You got to think back to the 50s. They want to know if somebody was raped in the 50s, they want to know what the woman was wearing. What did you wear?
What did you say?
What did you say? And what else? What did you do? That's what they wanted to know back then. These are different times now. Where now finally that a woman that's raped, you might listen to her and consider her side of the story as being accurate. Not back then. So when this 15-year-old girl said she was raped, Vernon John said, no, we got to have justice. We're not going to let this go down. So he insisted to the police department that they make this arrest. And they said of who, he identified the person and said, this person lives here. Arrest this person for the 15-year-old girl being raped. Well, they wouldn't do that. So he insisted on it. Now, I said that Dexter was a conservative church. You know what Dexter Avenue Church did? They told him to leave it alone. They said, look, man, it's already happened. You can't fix it. She's already been raped. Leave it alone.
What's done is done.
What's done is done. What's done is done. Well, he said no. They said leave it alone. Do you know that the church parishioners were calling his house, telling him to leave it alone? They were speaking to his wife, telling his wife, tell your husband, tell pastor to drop this. Drop this fight over the girl being raped. What's done is done. Well, he went to church that Sunday and preached a sermon that embarrassed everybody in the church. In his sermon, he got philosophical and drew a picture of a girl being raped and men standing around with their hands in their pocket looking. And women just looking. And said, is this what we're here for? To watch this happen and do nothing? Well, once he insisted and they could not deter him, and he, in that Sunday sermon, embarrassed him, they fired him. They fired him. As great as Vernon John was, they fired him and said, you know what? We got to get another pastor. They fired him. Now, 2 years later, and they had a 2-year intro where they had people coming through, but within 2 years, they picked Dr. King to be their pastor. They heard about his father. You know, Montgomery is not far from Atlanta. So they heard about his father and felt that his father, as well as the generation before, there were several generations of preachers coming out of their family. So they felt he came from good stock and felt that he'd be a good pastor. So they brought him in. They didn't even know who they was bringing in. So when Rosa Parks happened, what happened to Rosa Parks? Real quick. She what?
She refused to have her seat. She said, I'm sitting here, I'm not going nowhere.
That's right. She refused to give up her seat to a white woman.
Exactly, I'm still.
So when she refused to give up her seat, of course she was arrested. Now, once she was arrested, they had to do something. I won't belabor the point and talk about the 2 other sisters that got arrested. But it was 2 women that preceded Rosa Parks that was arrested. And I don't want to shock you, Regine, but they were dark-skinned.
Oh my God.
You know, to tell you the truth, they were dark-skinned.
Terrible.
And
Terrible.
Rosa Parks, light-skinned. And the fact that she was a card-carrying member of the NAACP. She was a lifetime member. So they had to do something. She was a member in good standing with the church. She was in good standing with the community. She worked for the NAACP. So all her credentials was in order. So they had to. So Edie Nixon, the labor guy, you know, who ran that aspect of the life in Montgomery, he was a labor leader, and of course Dr. King was a preacher. Reverend Abernathy and other ministers knew that they had to do something. So they gathered in church. I think it wasn't at Dexter. They was either at Reverend Abernathy or some other church, a big church. And they had a meeting. And at that meeting, I got you. And at that meeting, they decided to make Dr. King the leader. Now, Dr. King had just got there. He got there in 55. He had just got his doctoral thesis completed. So he's fresh out of seminary, fresh out of school. He was 25, no, he was 26 by the time that jumped off. 26-year-old, so all these grown men decided to make a 26-year-old the leader of the Montgomery Improvement Association. This was not an honor. He was a young man with a young wife and already had a baby. So you're putting him in the as a target for the White Citizens Council, who ran the town. And Montgomery was not the KKK. It was the White Citizens Council. Now, yeah, other places in the South was KKK strongholds. Montgomery in particular was the White Citizens Council. And so to put him in that position that he can be killed, his house can be firebombed, was not a good thing at that time. But let me, Dr. Munderson, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to say, we have to recognize that serious issues require serious deliberation.
Sure.
These issues are not arrived at arbitrarily. So these people, especially with the young woman, and again, with the other thing that, again, you mentioned, these people have to consider the ramifications for the totality of the situation.
Right.
So it's not just somebody just snaps his finger and they decide that we're going to do this or that.
I agree.
So that you need to emphasize so that the audience will realize that it's a broader issue.
Well, I think that people understand it's a broad issue, but most people, especially men, would say you're not going to rape a 15-year-old girl around me and me do nothing. So you, in certain situations, you do not consider the ramifications. Justice is justice. And a 15-year-old girl being raped, you cannot take the attitude, what's done is done. You have to do something about it. In this particular case with Rosa Parks, she was arrested, manhandled, and fined. And they said enough is enough. Consequently, they said this one, we're going to do something about it. So, in this particular case, you can't worry about the ramifications. The only thing was, I know they picked Dr. King because they didn't want to carry that burden. So they said, pick the new guy that just got in town. He's the new guy. He's 26 years old. He don't know anybody. He don't know nothing. He'll take it, which he did. But, and later, obviously, later, as you well know, his house was firebombed, and while he was at a rally, and he had to rush home to make sure. But obviously, you know, they got his family out of the house, the wife and children out of the house in time. But suffice it to say that the intent of the ministers who picked him was because they didn't want anything to come on their doorstep. So they picked him. And Abernathy told him. Abernathy told him that, look, man, they didn't pick you because of your eloquence. Because everybody would always say, oh man, that guy can speak. He's profound. I mean, the command of the language he had. But they picked him straight up because they didn't want that smoke. Basically, they didn't want the smoke that was bound to come their way. So they picked him. So that was the start, and of course it took 13 months for the Montgomery Improvement Association. And just remember, walking to and from work for 13 months is no lightweight thing. Now, depending on how many miles you had to walk a day, that was an amazing feat. Now, Dr. King didn't invent that. Adam Clayton Powell was doing protests and demonstrations 20, 30 years before, over 20 years before Dr. King did what he did. As a matter of fact, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which is not far from Alabama, Reverend Jefferson had did that a year earlier. He did a bus boycott for the very same reasons. So it wasn't that like he was reinventing the wheel. This was something that was already tried and tested. So Reverend Jefferson from Baton Rouge, Louisiana did it a year earlier, what he was able to pull off. But it was still an amazing feat to get it done in 13 months. So after that, after the 13 months, and I'm gonna get to Q&A, just give me a few more minutes. After the 13 months, and that was settled, after it was settled, you know what Dr. King did? He went to Ghana. Now that's amazing to have the foresight to know Ghana is celebrating its independence. Kwame Nkrumah, the great Asajifo, is celebrating their independence. I gotta be there to see it. Now this is a boy preacher. This is somebody that his first testing the waters was there in Montgomery, Alabama. Now he's going on the world stage. He's going to Ghana to celebrate with Kwame Nkrumah and the people of Ghana their independence from England. He goes there. Now Adam Clayton Powell was there, but Adam Clayton Powell was used to the world stage. For Dr. King to do that was big. To be there and to go there, it was major. And of course, they had Uncle Tom's, Carl Rowan, and others that were there too. And the State Department had a problem with Adam Clayton Powell being there. But later on, they approved it. But he was there already, and he was doing his thing because they were scared that Adam was going to expose America and all of its contradictions. But they ended up being happy the fact that he didn't do that. So you have Adam and you have Dr. King, MLK, there. So now, what do you say to Dr. King, now forming SCLC with Abernathy and others, which they were going to take all over the country and do the desegregation? I'm going to move ahead with respect to time and say that, well, you know, I glossed over a lot of stuff. You know, I didn't even mention that at Boston University, he became an Alpha. Alpha Phi Alpha, which is the first black fraternity. Alpha was first, and then later on, Q Psi Phi and all the other ones that came along, but Alphas were the first.
Sigma wasn't first?
Oh yeah, but that wasn't a fraternity. It was a fraternal order, but it wasn't a college fraternity. Now what Ray is talking about is the Boule.
Oh,
The Boule, what's that?
That's the gay one?
No, they're not gay. Well, some of them might be, I don't know. I'm just saying that was the black version of a Skull and Bones type of secret order
That was Sigma.
of powerful people. Yeah, Sigma Pi Rho.
Okay.
That's that was 1904, right? So you're right. In terms of numbers, it preceded Alpha, but Alpha was the first black college fraternity.
What's Phi Beta Sigma?
They're part of that so-called Divine Nine. That's part of it. And deltas and AKAs, you know, all of them. So, you know, it's, and Kappas, you know, the red and white, you know. So there were all these various fraternal orders, but Alpha was first. And this is why so many people join Alphas because that's Dr. King's order and so many others. And I won't mention how Ray ran into some problems by mentioning a certain Alpha that some people took offense to. I won't get into that now, but in any event, he joined there at Boston University. And so as SCLC grew, obviously his fame grew, and the civil rights movement was in full effect. But you have to remember that Rosa Parks, it wasn't so much that it was Dr. King and Abernathy and all, Edie Nixon, all of them getting together. She said she was motivated by what happened to Emmett Till in Mississippi. It was Emmett Till, a 14-year-old that was savagely killed, allegedly for whistling or making a negative comment to a white woman. And of course, that white woman recently, a few years ago, admitted that
It didn't happen.
it didn't happen. She admitted that. You know, and sometimes people, as they get older, they ain't conscious. It's the fact that they're old and they're scared to see Jesus. They scared. It's about that time. When you get in your late 70s and 80s, you start saying,
You don't know what's behind the curtain.
you know, it's almost that time, you know, my best days are behind me. I think I better get right with Jesus. So she went on record and admitted that she lied to her husband and her brother-in-law about what really happened, and they were the ones that actually went into the Till household and snatched him out of there at night, and never to be seen again alive. So
You had a recent issue here of a guy spent 28 years in prison. And the woman told her husband he did it, but he didn't.
yeah, that happens. You know, sometimes people will admit something. I think in her particular case, because she was getting up there in years. So she admitted, what's her name, Bryant? She admitted that Emmett Till never said anything to her.
Yes, that's her name.
So, so in any event, SCLC was on the rise, and you had the civil rights movement was in full effect. But like I said, Rosa Parks' motivation was Emmett Till. Their motivation was to put a dent or stop segregation. Now, segregation, that separateness of segregation was debilitating to so many of us that wanted and aspired to be around white folks, that we went a civil rights route where with Booker T. Washington, and then characterized even more pronounced under the great Marcus Mosiah Garvey, independence would have been the route. So in a real sense, do you boycott the buses to get some semblance of dignity by sitting on the bus, or do you usher in your own buses? Because you crippled Montgomery to a point where it had to acquiesce to your demands. Do you now start getting a few buses of your own? Do you start a system? Do you now stop using black banks? Do you start now your own credit unions, your own barbershops? You know that in the South, people made money taking pictures, right? Photographs, high school pictures, junior high school pictures, college pictures. Well, once you open up the floodgates, white people gonna go back to doing that. And they're gonna make a lot of money off you. You're gonna increase white business when you start going to white hotels, you start going to white motels, you stop developing your own credit unions, your banking. And some blacks, I mean not too much, but even a few blacks started going to white bars, which is ridiculous. That's one of the few things we still do today, is that we will go to a black barbershop, you know, regardless of anything else. But for the most part, so much industry, you know, black baseball suffered with the integration.
Negro League.
The Negro Leagues, yeah, no doubt. No doubt. So much commerce was lost, and we have people here, we have a brother here in finance that knows what the ramifications of supporting corporate America as opposed to developing your own, what happens with that. So, suffice it to say that there came a time where Dr. King was the face. Now, I want to start the Q&A in a minute, so I'll just say Dr. King was the face, or became the face, of the civil rights movement through hard work and determination, and he never looked at himself as above and everyone else below, everyone else a peon. That's never was Dr. King's thing. Kwame Ture always said that Dr. King was the kind of person that even if he stood for something that you felt was against our interests, you can debate it. You can argue with him. Kwame Ture talks about, Stokely Carmichael, to those who might not be familiar with his African name. He talks about staying up all night with Dr. King, arguing about America being the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. And then Dr. King in turn turned around and started talking about that. That's why that speech, why I opposed the war in Vietnam, cost him his life, because of these positions he was taking. But they made him into the person. They made him into the leader of the civil rights movement. And I'll just say quickly in ending, the civil rights movement now is nothing like what it was then. Your life was hanging in the balance if you participated in civil rights. You could be locked up, beaten, killed, never to be seen again. You could disappear. These civil rights leaders now intentionally get arrested just to get their names in a paper, just to get their face in a camera. Ray Ray can tell you about when Chanel Lewis, the brother who was accused of killing a white girl as she jogged out there in, what's that area called, right?
Cross Bay Boulevard.
Yeah, this Cross Bay, it's Far Rockaway. Far Rockaway. In that area, there were two people from the National Action Network that even after the decision, and we were all commenting on the courtroom steps as to what we thought of the decision, they went out there in the street and got arrested. And we told them, no, we've already talked to the police and they're gonna arrest you if you continue blocking traffic. But they wanted to get arrested because they wanted to get their names out there.
Took them around the corner and let them out.
Yeah, so they took them, rode them to the precinct, let them out. But they wanted to be seen and the cameras flashing while they're being arrested. So these fake arrests, these demonstrations now that you see Reverend Sharpton and Jesse and them do, they try to outdo each other. They get arrested. If one get arrested here, the other one gets arrested there. They in turn do settlements, Ben Crump and others. They faking jacks.
Yeah, we get
And they already know that what the settlement is gonna be, and no police officers go to jail in that process. This is why Ben Crump is allowed to go really from state to state and be the lead attorney in all these cases, because there's no justice. They settle. They don't stay there in the courtroom and fight it out. Ben Crump might not even know what a courtroom looks like. You know, he might not know. You ever seen, what was that movie, A Few Good Men? You remember that?
Yeah.
A Few Good Men? And Tom Cruise.
And hand the truth.
Yeah, well, Tom Cruise at the end of the movie, when he had won, he stood there in the courtroom, and as he was walking out the door, he said, "So this is what a courtroom looks like." Because all his other cases, he negotiated a settlement. That's why they picked him. And that's why the girl challenged him and said, "Look, why don't you for once be a real attorney and fight for your client instead of settling all the time?" So, in any event, I'm just saying that to say that SCLC did its thing, and so many others, and even in the early years, NAACP did a lot of good things. It's just that as you went later on, corporate America bought all of them. All the leaders of the 6 major civil rights organizations are all millionaires. I'm gonna say that again. All the major leaders of the major civil rights organizations are all millionaires.
Silver
Did I say some?
No.
I said all. All of them millionaires. Now, who knew that civil rights, you can become a millionaire as a civil rights leader? Who knew that?
King didn't know it.
And Dr. King in particular, with a wife and several children, Dr. King and a mortgage, Dr. King had maybe, some say around $6,000. When he got the Nobel Peace Prize, I'm trying to remember what it was back then. I think it might have been $30,000, $25,000, something like that. Back then, in the 60s, $25,000 was a lot of money. It's a lot of money. As a matter of fact, you could buy a house.
Yeah, nice one.
You could buy a nice house back then. So imagine you pick up a prize in that check, you could buy a house. He gave that money to the movement, which is what he always did. So you got to give him credit for that, and I credit him, even though I think that the civil rights movement should have emphasized economic development along the lines of a Marcus Garvey and independence along the lines of a Booker T. Washington, which had developed that type of framework. So, but you can't ignore Dr. King's sacrifice. For him to be threatened that if you come to this town, we're gonna blow your brains out. He came to the town. He would come and march. Now, I'll just say that, just to be honest, and I'll stop right after that, he was not there for Bloody Sunday. He was told by the people, by white folks, no, we're going to tear you up. You come here and we got something for you. The president, I'm going to say it again, I want you to get this one. The president of the United States called MLK and told him, don't you be out there Sunday. So he knew the Attorney General, Robert F. Kennedy, Bobby, whatever you want to call him, told him, look man, don't come. They never explained why Dr. King didn't show. Now everybody else out there got their butts whipped that day.
John Lewis.
John Lewis and others. I mean, I didn't want to say John Lewis' name because he pimped that and had a long congressional career just on that whipping. And I won't even get into right now. how he beat Julian Bond in that congressional race, the dirt that he did, but that's for another time. But in any event, the civil rights leaders now, the civil rights, what's that? But in
You
any,
said he beat who?
say that again?
It was $54,000 that Dr. King received.
It was 54,000?
Yeah.
Oh,
$54,000.
that's an amazing amount of money for 64. For 1964, $54,000.
That he turned over.
Man, I can't say you can retire with $54,000, but you can have a house, a car, and vacation and still have plenty of money in the bank if you had $54,000 back in 1964. You can live good, especially in the South. You can live like a king. $54,000, that's a lot of money. So in any event, I'm gonna stop now. I'm gonna stop now and just do some Q&A, whatever's on your mind. Please go right, let's get started. If you have any questions, I didn't get to a lot of stuff that I wanted to talk about, but let's get started. Anybody got a question?
Zoom audience question? Question from the floor, anybody?
I just wanted to make a comment because my mother was in that mix of Dr. King and Adam Clayton Powell tonight with Ghana. This is a photograph of my mother of March 6, 1957, dressed in a Ghanaian flag. I come from a history of fighting for African liberation, so I don't know if you want to put this on your camera. You made the point for me that that a man must stand up for certain things, right? Irrespective of how people view issues.
Yeah.
When Tawana Bradley approached Reverend Sharpton and said that these men raped me, he didn't question it. He stood up for her, right?
For a time. I'm just gonna respond
Well, that
for a time.
your memory is better than mine. I admit that. But he stood up. It's the same thing with me when I saw Barack Obama attacked.
In the long run, he betrayed her.
Well, I don't know all the
Reverend
details.
Sharpton betrayed her in the long run.
Well,
and I can't, since I'm in front of a camera, I gotta give it to you straight. He betrayed her in the long run.
I don't know about that.
He did.
He betrayed her in the long run in that situation. He, like most, they about that cheddar, they about money. And when it became financially advantageous to betray her, he betrayed her. And he actually told Edward I. Koch that all of this was a hoax, even though all of us that went up to the trial knew it wasn't a hoax. He said this was manufactured by Alton Maddox, and he was going to expose it. And Edward I. Koch said, look, I'll stand with you if you're going to expose it. But on the day of the press conference, Reverend Sharpton pulled out and did not appear with Edward I. Koch to betray Tawana Bradley.
I was upstate the day of that trial at the library, at the geography conference, and I had an issue, and I had to play cool because that's Clantown up there, and you guys.
Oh yeah, no, it's Clantown.
So I was in the situation right there while you guys were in the courthouse. I was in the library, and I was confronted with the situation. But I made it out.
Okay.
So, but my point was that I found that Obama was attacked, and hence I got into that fight. And I ended up writing all those books about him.
Obama?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you see the Republicans at work. You want to know about what the Republicans did to him? You got to find my books, okay?
Yeah.
So the
Okay,
thing is
gotcha.
standing up. I understand that.
That was your
Comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Zoom audience, anybody got a question or comment?
Sir,
Yes.
yes, I do.
Go
I
ahead.
wanted to state that the reason why Rosa Parks was chosen, not only did she go to school with Slick, they used to have those classes.
Yes.
She was the investigator for Reese Taylor. Reese
Yes.
Taylor was a woman of
Who was raped?
a
Yeah.
married woman that was raped,
Right.
gang raped, and she knew who raped her.
Yes.
So Rosa Parks was the one that went down to investigate and bring it back to the NAACP and everyone else.
That's correct.
And yes, they were caught. So because of her fortitude, you know, she calculated, and they decided that she would, because the other two women that were pulled off of buses, the difference was one was a pregnant, unmarried teenager.
Yes. True.
And the other one was not a teenager, but she wasn't married. So that's the reason why they chose Rosa Parks, because it looked.
Well, that's the reason they gave. That's the reason they gave. Go ahead. That's the reason they gave. She was a lifetime member, as I pointed out, of the NAACP, and that did carry weight with E.D. Nixon and others, because if you're not going to support Rosa Parks, who was a lifetime member of the NAACP, as you're pointing out, the work that she had did prior to, then who were you going to support? So yes, that's a good point, that Rosa Parks was special. So they had to give her just due and support her.
Okay, no more, anybody got another question from the floor?
Reggie, you got any questions?
You didn't,
Yeah, one on Zoom.
Oh, okay, we'll get back to Zoom. Go ahead, Reggie.
my thing is about concerning Bayard Rustin and his influence on the civil rights movement.
Right.
I'm assuming it's a little overblown. Am I incorrect about that?
You're absolutely correct. That what's brought Bayard Rustin out of mothballs in this time is the same thing that brought Baldwin out of mothballs, and they made a movie about both of them. And I'm not claiming for a second that they were in any means obscure during their lifetime. But why would you make movies of them? Could it be because both of them were homosexuals? Both of them was gay as can be. Consequently, the gay community lifted them up and raised them and put them in front of everybody. So when all is said and done, you would think that Bayard Rustin was the architect of everything they were doing, as opposed to SNCC, who was ahead of all the other civil rights movements for the most part. They was always, Dr. King and others was always trying to catch up with SNCC. SNCC was more progressive and ahead of them, and certainly Baldwin was not a leader. Baldwin was a writer. He does not have the right to be considered a leader of men, especially when he was sleeping in all these white men's beds. Him and Bayard Rustin. They both had white boyfriends.
All right, who got their hands up? 2 quick questions and that's it. Quick, because we gotta get out of here.
Okay. Quick, okay. Yes, peaceful greetings, everyone. My name is Leona from Michigan. Listen, Brother Michael, 2 quick questions.
Sure.
First of all, I want to confirm, did you say that today was the birthday of the late Miss Leola Maddox? Did you say that earlier in your presentation?
Yeah.
Today was her birthday?
No, not today. This month was her, she had a birthday this month.
Oh, this month? What day this month? Oh,
I forgot. It's,
January 12th, Har Khalid Muhammad.
yeah, the 12th, that's correct, 12.
okay, thank you for that.
Her and Dr. Collins.
Wasn't it the late Dexter King who in 1999, I believe it was, at a press conference stated that the United States government had a hand in the killing of his father, the Reverend Dr. Martin?
Yeah, now I'm wondering what took him so long. So that's not to his credit. We're dismayed that it took him that long. Of course, when you're part of the King family, you're privileged and don't have to work one day in your life. I mean, it's a real luxury to literally 30 years after the fact, you say that the government had a hand in killing your daddy. After getting all that government funding and come on.
He said that in 1999. No, sir, he didn't wait 30 years to say it. They had a trial, with
Okay, in 99.
Yeah, they sued.
What year was Dr. King killed?
Right.
What year was Dr. King killed?
68?
No, I want her
They
name.
68.
68.
They
99 is what, 31 years
Hold up.
later?
Everybody can't talk.
99 is 31 years later, is that right?
I think you're right. Yes.
So, do you think it took a trial to realize that, that I won't say a Delta Force, but a Delta Force type unit within the Army was already, was based over there and had rented the fire station and had soldiers there? And it's not a coincidence that all the black volunteer police officers who was off that day, who was supposed to secure Dr. King, they got called back on duty. Isn't that a little mysterious? That the people who were supposed to protect him that day got called in to work. So there are a lot of things. So why would Dexter King wait 31 years to deduce what we already know?
Okay,
Wait, now, listen, they had a trial, I don't,
Okay, they had a trial. What happened in that trial?
yeah, but no, this is not a debate.
No, let her talk, right? Let her talk.
no.
Go ahead.
The security and all that stuff, that's not my lane, I don't know anything about it. But
Okay.
I would argue what Dick Gregory said about the things those children went through and what they witnessed growing up. And I don't know that I'm in a position to blame him about anything, whether he waited.
I'm not blaming him.
As far as I know, he's the only one that said it in public.
I'm not blaming him. I'm just merely saying, sister, I want you to understand.
Finish talking. Go ahead. Finish your statement.
No, I was just asking a question. I was just wondering, I was going to ask you, the speaker, wasn't it true that Dexter King, the late Dexter King, was the only one who stood up and said, 30 years after, what happened?
And I'm saying that this is true. However, why did it take him that long to come on board? He's a grown man. It's one thing as a little boy.
We don't know that he was off board. He may have already known it himself. They might have known it all.
Well, if he knew it all that time, why didn't he say it?
He said it in public. I don't know, sir.
Okay, I'm just raising a question. It's almost like somebody dies and you wait 31 years later to say the government had something to do with it. The government's fingerprints was all over that.
All right, Miss Nix, you got something to say?
Yes, besides the killing the grandmother and so forth, so there's a lot of reasons. But Miss King was still alive when they sued? And the King family, did they receive money for the government murdering their family?
No, I don't think that the government is admitted to any role in that assassination at all.
It's did anybody get William Pepper's book on assassination of Dr. King?
Oh, I know how he.
I have it, Orders to Kill, I have it.
Yeah, did anybody on the Zoom, William Pepper's book?
Yeah, I caught it on the lecture. I
Okay.
my question.
So,
But in any event, Caldwell from I think he was with the Daily News at that time, I'm not sure, I think it was
Caldwell.
That's right.
he was with the Daily News. He gave the government so much information because he was there that day when it happened, and they did not follow up on the information. It was very revealing, some of the things that Earl Caldwell pointed out. So I'm just saying, and that information was given to the King family. So why would a King family member wait 31 years after their father's death to even mention that?
all right.
Is there anybody else?
So that's it. That's it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, give Brother Mike a great big hand. Zoom audience, give yourself a great big hand for participating. As you know, Black History Month is going to be February. Trust Graham will be coming in, hopefully. So we got to start cleaning up. Give yourself a great big hand.
All right.
Do you know who the cleanup was that George Washington would have?
Our cash app is in
Yeah, I'll tell you next week.
in the chat if you feel like helping out.
I'll give it to you.
Now,
I'll give it to you later. I'll definitely give you the name of the person.
and then the Civil War said it was brought about for economic reasons, first caught in the management of something.
Yeah.
Sexual abuse.
Jimbo, what you drinking there, kid?
Say that again.
Someone wants
Jumbo, what you drinking? Some ginger tea?
reasons, which was caught in the management of what was sexual abuse of black women. It was a
Yeah, that was a part of it, you know.
management of what, because I didn't get that part. That's what I was trying to do.
Okay, I said that cotton was king. Economically, they were selling cotton, tobacco,
Right.
Sugar.